Okay, so where do we begin with Stevie Wonder? Because we've talked about
the
Stevie
numbers,
Wonder.
John. The numbers.
Yeah,
We
the
begin with
numbers.
the numbers.
The
I'm
numbers
standing
is a
up,
great
too.
place to start.
Yep, there you go.
I'm
So
transforming the desk.
there you go. Number 30 in the 1970s, number 3 in 1973, number 118 overall, and in Rolling Stone's list, it comes in at number 34.
Okay, well, we've covered Stevie Wonder twice. We've done, in bonus episodes, we've done Talking Book and Music of My Mind. Actually, we did them in the reverse order, and actually that's how they came to. Music of My Mind came first, and Talking Book came second. So you can check out the bonus episodes from this season, season 2, if you want to find out a little bit about our thoughts on those albums, and we can expand on that. But we've never done a full bio, and to give Stevie Wonder a full bio, we're going to also do Songs in the Key of Life later, so I'll probably stretch it over both, but I'm going to give the big bullet points right off the bat. And guys, feel free to jump in if you have questions, but Stevie Wonder was born in Saginaw, Michigan. As pretty much everybody knows, Stevie Wonder was blind.
Have you been to Saginaw, John?
I have been to Saganasty is the nickname, actually, for Saginaw as well.
Did you hitchhike from there?
Saginaw is a rough place. It used to be an industrial part of Michigan, sort of like a Flint, type deal, or Warren, Michigan, right? And so Saginaw is similar to that, but it's hardworking folks, right? And post World War II boom town, right, in Michigan that was there. So it was a different. It was a little bit different Michigan there because it was about a decade after. The war ended, or right about a little bit before that when Stevie Wonder was born. So Stevie Wonder was not born blind, but he did have a pre-existing retinal condition that basically turned into blindness because he was born premature, and to save his life they had to place him in an incubator, and the amount of oxygen in there did along with the pre-existing retinal condition, caused the blindness. It is a condition that would not happen now. They've figured out how to keep that from happening, but that is how that happened, in case you're wondering. The family moved to Detroit, which is relatively close to Saginaw, at the age of 4, and at the age of 9, he was discovered because Ronnie White of the Miracles, I'm sure you're familiar with who the Miracles are. We have covered Smokey and them. Smokey and them before in the early 60s. So he hears Stevie singing, is impressed, takes it to Berry Gordy of Motown, and he auditions him, likes what he says, and signs him at 9. And he is little Stevie Wonder, and he is... the best way to describe this period is he is just putting out smash hit after smash hit in the 60s, right? So his 60s is basically, he is a Motown artist who is getting a ton of hits. There is a period where his voice changes a little bit in puberty, and they were a little bit worried. And that seems to be a thing for Motown, right? Because we talked about that with Marvin Gaye, I think, and we talked about it with someone else, too, who's I'm blanking on right now. But basically, that... when they hit puberty, right? You have to see if the voice is still there. But there's a little bit of hiccups as Stevie Wonder figures out how to, adjust to the new, deeper voice, but he makes it work, and he continues to release smash hits. So then a couple different things happen around 1971 that are interesting, right before he goes into that stretch that's known as the classic Stevie Wonder period. His Motown contract actually runs out, and he actually gains access to a trust fund of his money from that period of time where he was a prolific, hit maker, basically from the ages of 9 to 21. And he decides to not sign with Motown initially. Instead, he takes some of the money, he builds himself a studio, and he goes to USC, University of Southern California, to study music theory during that time, which actually I did not know, which is fascinating. So he's there for a little while. This leads to Motown going into scramble to sign him mode, and they do. And he actually signs for an increased royalty rate, and they allow him to create his own publishing company. So he actually, to this day, owns the rights to his music.
Good for him.
Which, if you know anything about... smart. He had a lot of things going against him, right? He was young. Motown was known kind of for having a strong hand, not them alone, right? But that was definitely a thing. And, he was an African-American male, right? Who there's a history there of taking advantage of acts and stuff. But Stevie was able to, no pun intended, sort of see the future a little bit in terms of, what that could look like. So he did very well for himself financially. That allowed him to also be able to have the independence that becomes an interesting part of the next stage of his career, because what happens is he releases an initial album and then he does Music of My Mind and Talking Book, and that is considered to be where Stevie Wonder is becoming an adult artist, right? But he still sticks heavily to romantic ballads, right? Which I think we've even commented on in both of them, right? That he kind of sings about. I think I joked around at one point, like, a lot of his songs could be, sang it's like love, 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 all the time, because that's really what you're hearing, right? This is considered to be where it shifts to him going from that romantic ballad and sort of a child, like more, young adolescent, just out of adolescence, to a more musically mature and socially conscious artist. And certainly lyrically, you can hear that all over the place. So that is one of the things that this album is known for. It is known for being where he makes that transition most clearly. It's the third of what's considered to be his peak stretch. We've talked about the other two. This is the third in line, and then Songs of the Key of Life would be the fourth. There actually is an album between Innervisions and Songs in the Key of Life that we'll talk about why it's considered to be a little bit more hit and miss. Innervisions is considered to be two-part, right? One of them is because of his blindness, right? Innervisions is kind of like him seeing it in his own way, right? Music of My Mind kind of has the same concept, right? But Innervisions is also supposed to say like him looking inside of himself as a younger person and becoming a man. So that's the duality right there. Wonder played all or virtually all of the instruments on 7 of the album's 9 tracks. There's a ton of instrumentation on this, and he's basically a one-man band on this. He's reminiscent, and this is very influential. You guys can probably guess already who I'm going to say. This was highly influential on a specific artist who would come of age about 10 years later, a little less than 10 years later. Can you guys think of who I'm talking about? He's also referred to as a one-man band often. Same genre.
Prince?
You got it. Yep, this one, Prince was all over this one, as you might imagine. This is also really well known for being the first album to use the Tonto, Tonto synth. And boy, it also has the ARP synth on this as well. So let me start about that real quick. The ARP synth was the biggest competitor for the Mini Moog synthesizer and is the one that was used by Edward Winter. And also, when you Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? That sound, that's what the ARP synth sounds like. It was huge in the very late 60s and throughout the 70s. And then basically, it's like the story you heard of like the passenger pigeon, that there were like millions and millions of them. And then like 30 years later, they were like extinct. That's kind of like the story of the ARP synth. It was huge, huge, huge. And then suddenly it wasn't and just died off entirely. But the Tonto synth is, I don't even know where to begin on this story, guys. It's what it's known for. But the Tonto synth was massively important for R&B music throughout the 70s. It becomes, you can't see anybody that's not using the Tonto synth in 70s R&B. And one of the things I want us to do is, as we go through the 70s, I want us to see how many times we can hear the Tonto synth. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to send you guys some clips of what it sounds like. But this album is a great place to start because the synth that's all over this album, and it is, right, is mostly Tonto synth. But really quickly, the Tonto synth, there was a group called the Original New Timbral Orchestra, and it was 2 people that participated in that, and Malcolm Cecil is the one who's probably more known. He had a partner there in his act, but basically Malcolm Cecil creates this Tonto as sort of a Moog modular synthesizer, and then he adds a Moog 3 to it, and then it continues to morph, and we're getting into the weeds here, right? But he keeps adding different panels to it and custom modules, and he's got an electrical engineering background. But long story short, this thing becomes a super synth, right? And it becomes a hallmark sound of the 70s. And what I'm going to do on the CTS Twitter page is I'm going to put up some clips of the Tonto synth in action, not just in Stevie Wonder's work, but also in classic R&B throughout the 70s and even the 80s, so you know what it sounds like.
Nice.
But the Tonto synth, a big piece of the story of this album is the Tonto synth, because that is the most, with the exception of the instruments that Stevie is playing, he's also playing this Tonto synth. So you probably, I know you're not a lyrics guy, Matt, you say, but it's hard to not hear the social consciousness in this album.
I heard the guy getting arrested.
Well, there's
and going
that.
to jail.
There's that, but there's like He's Mr. Know-It-All, which is about Richard Nixon, and Stevie Wonder wasn't really, kind of. He basically told people that was what it was about.
He didn't vote for Nixon.
He was not a Nixon voter, I can tell you that. Living for the City was about systemic racism, and that's the one, Matt, that you mentioned with the traffic and the voices and the sirens and stuff. Income inequality and Living for the City, drug abuse and Too High. And when you listen to these lyrics, you can hear it. He's definitely not writing, love, love, love.
I love loving you, loving all the time.
I love loving you when I love it, and it's loving to. Yeah, that's not this album. The other thing that is amazing about this, let me add one more thing, by the way. This peaked at number 4 on the Billboard charts. It was Album of the Year at the 16th Grammys, which was in 1974. Another thing, though, that I did not know about this was that Stevie Wonder, 3 days after this album came out, was involved in an incredibly severe car accident. It is one of these things that we hear these stories, guys, that don't seem like they could be real, but here's what happened. He was in the car with the friend who was driving, obviously, and he's in the passenger seat. They're behind a truck with logs in it, okay?
Oh, God.
They're sort of weaving in and out of traffic is how it's described often. And suddenly that truck comes to a stop and logs fall out of the truck, one of which goes through the window and hits Stevie Wonder in the head, causing him to be in a coma for 5 days due to a severe brain contusion.
Jesus.
He actually recovers fully after a year where he was terrified that he was going to lose his music. There's stories where he's afraid he was going to lose his musical ability. And he was afraid to pick up instruments because he's like, oh my God, if I can't do this, what is it? But he had medication and stuff like that. There's a ton of brain swelling and stuff. But I mean, Stevie's still around now, right? And this is 1973.
Wow.
And so, the road back was like a year-long process. He lost his sense of smell, but he recovered it later. And there's a lot of stories that, he was just terrified that he was going to lose his musical faculty. Of course, in the aftermath of this, he processes, and a lot of people say this is where he takes that idea of like love and stuff and adds a real spirituality to it. Remember, this is 3 days after this album comes out, so you don't hear it on the Innervisions album. But there's, like I said, there's an album after this that's about that period of time, and then there's songs in the key of life, so we can kind of revisit that. Wonder was supposed to go on a 5-week 20-city tour after this was released. Obviously, he cannot do that, but he does play one date in Madison Square Garden in late March 1974. There are 21,000 people in the audience, and Stevie Wonder began the concert by pointing to his scarred forehead, looking up, smiling, and says, "Thanks to God that I'm alive." And they said it was a real, touching moment. I'd like to find that on YouTube as well and post that, because I think that would be a fascinating story. But I had no idea about this near-death experience for Stevie Wonder as well. So you always find different stuff. So there's a little bit of the background of this album. Now, Matt has been very vocal about not loving the Stevie Wonder work we've done so far, and Josh has been also neutral
also
to down
vocal.
on the vocal, neutral to down, maybe not as vociferously as Matt. I've kind of fallen more on the it's inconsistent, but there's stuff that I like on this. I will be interested to hear what you guys think of this album, because we can say a lot of things about it and you may not like it, but it certainly doesn't sound like the other two albums that we've done. Matt, I think the floor is yours to start. Did Stevie win you over on this one, or is he 0 for 3?
Actually, Josh, is it your turn?
Oh, I mean, I can start, sure.
I want to hear you first.
Okay. So, this is an improvement on the other albums, in that I feel like I liked 4 of the songs on this album, but he's still doing frustrating things for me. My wife said that this album was unbearable, so you can say
ouch.
what you can say about that. Yeah, she didn't like it too much. So it definitely, I appreciate that.
Can I say one thing real quick? Because there's a lot of Stevie Wonder fans that like this album, so I feel I
Yeah.
have to let them know by now. I really like this album. So if these two don't, which I think is where we're trending right now, I will be here to give a passionate defense afterwards. So stay around if you want to hear it.
Well, I appreciate the fact that he has gone on to talk about social issues. I feel like that is apparent from listening to the album, and it brings a freshness and a much needed boost of energy to his album, and I appreciated that as a result. He still has a tendency to go too long on songs and do the kind of repetition or freestyle that he does. He did that in Living in the City, but that kind of had a skit or kind of, I don't know what you would call it, added, so that wasn't really an issue for me. I hear a lot of John Legend on this album. I'm sure that this is a big influence on him as an artist, and I really liked the he still has the really good like funky grooves in a lot of the songs, and this album as a whole is more upbeat than his previous albums, which I was down on. So I like that as well. I feel like Living for the City is probably his first great song since Superstition for me. And then the other ones that I really liked were Higher Ground, and I liked All Is Fair in Love. I feel like that was an appropriate level ballad. And Don't You Worry About a Thing. I thought that was kind of a nice, like almost Spanish sounding beat to it, and
It's like a salsa.
yeah, I thought it was the beginning of the Sex and the City theme song at first, but I went back and listened to that, and it's not, but it is a little similar. So it's as far as social issue goes, I still like Bill Withers more, but this is the highest I've been on Stevie Wonder, although I still don't feel like he's reached the potential for me that I'm expecting from him, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Matt?
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think this is it's better than the last two. Still not a big fan of it. I only really counted two songs that I really liked, which were Higher Ground and He's Mr. Know-It-All. And I don't know, man. I don't his sounds, those sound effects, the Tonto or Toto or whatever, the synthesizer
Clavinet
that he's using. Yeah, it's not doing it for me. To me it sounds very dated. I don't think it's that pleasurable or that interesting of an instrument. I just think I really don't like it, and that's probably why I like He's Mr. Know-It-All, because it's a more stripped down kind of version of it. I like that melody a lot too. God, I hated the way this album started. I did not like Too High. The I didn't like that.
Very repetitious.
Yeah,
song.
and it's just the melody didn't really do anything for me. I think that the chorus was boring. Visions, I wanted to fall asleep. That song actually toyed with me, because there's a part of that song where it kind of cuts out. I'm like, all right, great, it's over. Nope, he comes right back in 2 seconds later. I'm like, oh, great, I get more of this, right? And so he's got some moments in here. Living for the City, it's along the longer side, but it's got parts that I think are okay. Golden Lady, okay, but I don't know, guys. Like this, for as high as he's been rated, for what I was expecting, I'm starting to feel like he's the most overrated artist that we've covered on this podcast. Like, I just don't get it, and I'm glad he's out there. I think he's a tremendously talented musician. I do like his voice. The fact that he's doing all of this stuff, that he's doing basically all the instrumentation, he's doing the arrangements, he's doing the production. It doesn't surprise me at all that he went back to school and did music theory. He's a very impressive artist. It's just one of those guys that's just not really doing much for me. And when I hear like these albums being the 30th best of all time, like the 51st, now I don't know about Songs in the Key of Life, so I'm still holding out hope that there will be that album out there that I will really grasp on and be like, okay, here, I get it. But it's not really happening for me, and this album didn't really do a whole lot for me, and it's better than the last two, right? I think that they're getting, as we go along, it's getting better, but Stevie Wonder, questioning. I just don't think he's my cup of tea. So, there's, like I said, there's elements there, but to me, kind of the instrumentation really takes away a lot from it. I don't like the ballads. I didn't like All in Love is Fair. Unlike Josh, I thought that was another snooze fest. So I'm sorry, people that love Stevie Wonder. I'm glad you do. I just don't. So that's where I'm at.
I think I heard the Red Hot Chili Peppers version of Higher Ground before this one.
I did too. Yeah,
that's always like colored.
And
I was
actually,
like, where have I heard this song before?
And actually, I remember I saw Anthony Kiedis do an interview about it like shortly after it came out, and that's when he was like, it was a Stevie Wonder song. And he made a joke out of it, saying, Stevie called us up and was begging us, guys, please, can you do this song? And he's like, I don't know, Stevie, we're really busy, or something like that. And I thought he was joking that it was a Stevie Wonder song. Like I'm like, really, Stevie Wonder did that? And then I heard it, and I was like, oh, okay. So that's a good point. I the same thing with me, Josh.
Okay,
right,
John, why are we wrong, John?
Come to your
I've been very patient, but like they're wrong on this. This is the first one we hear where it all comes together. I've sort of said that's fine. You've already said your piece though, so let me tell you why you're wrong on this one. This is what R&B music and soul music in the 70s sounds like when it's at its best. This one goes right up there with pieces of what the Isley Brothers and the smoothness of someone like Teddy Pendergrass singing. It has that wonderful texture of voice in this. The instrumentation is I love the fact that he's nodding to a bunch of styles. There's Latin, there's stuff that sounds vaguely reggae. There's throwbacks to the old version of black music, like classic R&B and the Motown standards. There's stuff that could be R&B musician pieces. I just love the way this album sounds. It's layered. The second time you listen to it, it sounds even better than the first. I listened to it for a third time because I really liked the difference between the first and the second, and each time I picked up new stuff that he was doing. The stuff that didn't connect with me as much in the first and second one, the sameness, I think was what it was absent on this one because he was going in different genres on this one, which kept it very fresh. It gave it a very contemporary feel. Josh mentioned John Legend. John Legend is like
he's your favorite.
Discount version of what Stevie Wonder's doing here. The songwriting was another thing that was a revelation on this one. I was the one who kind of most was like, love, 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 as I mentioned before, and like sort of like there was a lot of lyrics like, I'm bad because I'm sad and we're, glad, and stuff like that. It's like, that's a little schlocky. That is mostly gone here. Like Too High has elements of that, but I disagree with you, Matt. I really like Too High. It gave one thing you guys both didn't mention too is this is a funky album. This is almost as funky as like a Parliament album. It's just funk throughout it. It makes it just sound vibrant and fresh. He does funk from a different standpoint that Parliament or Isaac Hayes and even like Sly Stone did, right? There's nothing dark about what Stevie Wonder does. It's like an uplifting message, right? And I think the problem with the uplifting message is that when not done the right way, it can sort of seem like it's edgeless, which I think we all sort of recognized at the beginning. But this one was not edgeless to me. This one, the edge came from the virtuoso music. That this was the first time that I really saw it pieced together. There were bits and pieces, like Superstition and, When I Fall in Love, you'd see different pieces of that, right? But this is one where throughout I saw it. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought it has high re-listenability, which I wouldn't have said about the first two albums that we listened to. And it really does sound a lot like where R&B music was going in the 70s. That seems to be a theme this week, right? Like, Lou Reed, pretended where indie rock was going, Deep Purple, pretended where, hard rock was going. And this pretends quite a bit of where R&B music was going, not just because the Tonto would become omnipresent. And I don't know how much R&B you guys listen to, guys, like 70s R&B, but like, you may have listened to it without realizing you have because of all the samples from classic hip hop that was there, but like that really was, the sound that you were hearing, right, in those songs was the Tonto synthesizer. And I never knew exactly what it was called, but now I'm like, there it is. So this one's a strong thumbs up for me. I mean, I liked every album this week, and I loved it because it was a lot of visionary albums, and I knew it was there for Stevie Wonder because there's just too much that I've heard that I enjoyed, and you can't make that type of music without having pieces on there. So I'll be honest, I appreciate your honesty, and that's why I think this podcast is good. It's very easy to just say you like something because it's highly ranked, and you should like it. So I appreciate that you guys can't do it, but there's no phony in this for me. This was the one where it all clicked for me, and I would give this a strong thumbs up. I do want to mention that like the snare drum on this, I always it's there like just every once in a while, and I love the sound of that. And yeah, I just strong recommend for me. I'll be the dissenting voice on this one. And if you're trying to wonder what Stevie Wonder's all about, I mean, maybe you'll listen to this and be a little bit confused, right? And we haven't done songs in the key yet, which I'll be interested to hear as well, because I only know bits and pieces of that. But I definitely think if you were inclined, especially and you like soul and R&B music, or some of the artists in the modern day that cite Stevie Wonder as an influence, you definitely want to go here first before you go to Music in My Mind and Talking Book, because this is a more complete album. So thumbs up from John.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just because he's like more influential in a genre of music that I'm not familiar with, and so he doesn't have that kind of founding father type of status. I always expect his albums to be like catchier than they are or something, or I'm thinking that they would have more hits than they do. I don't know what it is about it, but it hasn't hit for me yet. So
yeah, and I mean, I wonder if you run into because we're gonna, especially in the bonus episodes, we're gonna run into a lot more soul and R&B in the 70s, and there might be versions of it that you like more, right? Yeah. But and I'll be interested to see if you go, oh, okay, you may not like the albums more, but you'll say, I can see it now. Yeah. I did grow up listening to a ton of 70s R&B and soul, and so there were touch points for me that I was immediately able to recognize. Yeah. And, he kind of bridges the gap between, what we've heard before, and then, some people have described Stevie Wonder, right, as like an amalgam of in many ways all black music, and there's an argument to be made for that because he's doing 70s black music, right? There's elements of soul, there's elements of post Motown, there's funk, mm-hmm. There's balladeering, right? And then he's got elements of like the old rock and roll and R&B, and it just kind of, it all pieces together, and he's sort of the fusion point for all of it, which makes sense because the dude's been performing since the early 60s, right? So he's 9 and now he's there. He's been in contemporary black music, right? Mm-hmm. From, just after Little Richard, Chubby Checker, right? That next early genre, he's there putting out hits, and he's still here in 73, at the forefront. So he never really left. So he was always there, right? So it makes sense that he would sort of be the perfect troubadour for that. So
he's also the only child star actor that we've talked about that has been able to start from a child and continue through adulthood.
Well, his career is remarkably similar to Michael Jackson's when you think mm-hmm. about it, like all the way down to like he starts as a child performer, churns out hits, right? Kind of, off the wall, right? Is a little bit of his beginning period before he blows up. In Stevie Wonder's case, it would be this album and Songs in the Key, right? For, Michael Jackson, it's probably Thriller and, bad, but the music industry you were able to move a little slower at that point as opposed to just relying, on plowing out the album. And, and I one thing I also want to mention too is that, albums for a lot of black music in the 60s were around, but they were not necessarily the currency. And we've talked about that, right? It was about live performances and stuff like that. This is really, with the Marvin Gaye album we did, What's Going On, and the Stevie Wonder stuff right here. This is the beginning of like, black artists, like the album concept, really catching on, and being more of like in the mainstream. So I don't want to say it wasn't there, but it took a little bit longer than sort of like the bands and putting out an album, right? And that being around the album, and of course by the mid 70s we have a genre literally called album oriented rock, right? So that was totally mainstream. But yeah, so just some stuff I want to put in there.
No, he's definitely got the funk is in a lot of songs here, and I do like that. I think it's just I really think the instrumentation, like the stuff that the sounds, it's just really it's kind of annoying to me. I mean, I get why some people might like it. It's just I don't know, man. I'm waiting for that Bill Withers moment, like where when that's something that I hear that I'm like, wow, I didn't really know a whole lot about that, and that music meant so much more to me, and just it was much more. I don't know. I felt that a lot more than I did this, which is interesting because some of the stuff is way more upbeat. This is and maybe even poppier, than what Bill Withers was doing.
Do you think it's because I love those two Bill Withers albums as well, but he was doing simple stuff, right? He was doing simple arrangement, not bad, simple. You know what I mean? He was doing simple in a really pleasing way, and it takes talent to do that. But Wonder's doing more stuff. I think I want to go back to the idea that maybe it's not like a heritage of music you listen to, right? Because you like the equivalent of the complexity of what Stevie Wonder's doing in the frameworks that you're familiar with, Matt, whether it be prog rock or the Beatles, right? Ahead of their time and stuff like that. But in this case, sort of like the complexity sounds foreign to you, right? Whereas the simplistic stuff might sound more like the music you're more familiar with. Like, I know you really like the Aretha Franklin stuff, right? And in some ways, she's doing the same thing, just singing, you know what I mean? Like, about different stuff. Like I said, that's where I'm going to be fascinated as we continue on, right? To see, as you listen to more, right? Is there an evolution on that, or is it just going to be a long period of time where you're getting your reps, right? And it still doesn't click with you, but you have your reps, so you get it, right? And will you have like a Velvet Underground moment with me where it's like, it all comes together, and now I'm not even that, but I can appreciate everything else, right? And Josh almost had that with like Krautrock last week, right? Where he's like, okay, I'm starting to see the pieces come together now, and it's making more sense. I wonder if that'll be for you, Matt.
I wouldn't mind that, because you're right. I like intricate, complicated, interesting, arrangements in music. But and that's certainly happening here. I'm not disputing that, but I need something to hang my hat on that kind of, that gets me, where I need to go. And I didn't really feel that here. And I don't know. I want to be open-minded. I really going to want to. It's almost like I'm going to feel pressure to like songs in the key of life, because I'm like, I gotta like this, but I'm not going to fake it, right? But it's been interesting listening, and I got a little bit of that with this, and I'm like, all right, let's see what happens, and then. I don't know, right off the bat, I think I got a real bad taste in my mouth of those first two songs. Like, I was just like, really? Come on. I will give you this. It's certainly more varied, right, than the last two albums, both musically and lyrically, although I care more about the music. And I appreciate the fact that he's doing different things. It's just, I was like, okay, I don't think I'm there yet. And you're right. I don't know. Will I get there? Who knows? But, the guy's mad talented. There's no doubt about that. And I'm glad that he exists because, clearly he's striking a chord with a lot of people, right? And he struck a chord with a lot of people that did a lot of music after the fact, probably a lot of that I really enjoy, artists that I really do like. So this is why I'm glad that even though there might be artists out there that I don't particularly care for or I don't get necessarily, somebody else is getting something out of it. And then they're passing that along and just going down the line and, kind of changing it, making it their own. And that's what's great about it. So, good on him. Just it's not yet, man. Not there yet.
Gotcha. No, I think it's important to keep it honest because the integrity is where people know that what theoretically what we're saying is what we believe.
CTS stands for integrity.
Integrity, exactly. It's very easy to say you like everything and then post stuff up on YouTube, right? But, we run the risk of putting up, hey, we hate this album, you know what I mean? And people are not looking for that in their takes. So, we also will be the first to say that we are not ourselves skilled musicians. So there's going to be things that sometimes we're just talking about how it sounds to us, right? As opposed to the other layers. And, that's part of what being a fan is. And, we accept those limitations, but I do appreciate the varied taste, and we're not going to like everything we listen to. So we'll see if Stevie changes Matt's mind on the fourth one, but hopefully, Matt, you don't feel pressure because it shouldn't be that way. It should be just listen to it and see where you're at. But we'll have more to talk about with Stevie next time we cover him for the last time with Songs in the Key of Life.